the loneliest seat in the organization is the top. And so I think that the reality is, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One, it's like, okay, you're the final decision maker typically. So he or she, there's a lot of pressure on that. And so that's a lonely spot to be in, knowing that a decision I make is going to either make or break the organization. You're also looked a lot of times at being the strongest. And so things should bother you the least.
Awekenge, this is Mental Matters, hosted by Asekho.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Mental Matters, the show where we tackle what truly matters, our minds, our well-being, and how we navigate life challenges together. I'm your host, Asekho, and today we're diving into an issue that affects millions of people worldwide, but often remains hidden behind closed doors: corporate mental health. Now, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by endless deadlines? Or maybe you've struggled to find balance between climbing the career ladder and taking care of yourself? If so, you're not alone. In fact, studies show that work-related stress is one of the leading causes of mental health issues globally. And this time we bring this conversation out into the open. So through the couple of days, we'll be actually speaking up with experts on the conversation when it comes to mental health and corporate environment. And hopefully you'll enjoy the conversation and be able to actually identify why is it so important to take care of your mental health. And yeah, I'm talking to you. So without further ado, in some way, in a world that never stops moving, it's crucial to remember productivity doesn't come at the expense of our well-being. So stay tuned because today and the next couple of days will redefining success one healthy mind at a time. Don't go anywhere. This is Mental Matters and we're just getting started. To kick things off, I'm quite fascinated. Would you say that you always admired leadership, and what made you actually in leadership to look at the side of mental health?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, leadership's always been it's always been something that I didn't necessarily seek out, but like if it was playing sports growing up or in class, I think a lot of us have natural leadership. I think there are natural leadership skills. I would say that there's leadership can also be learned. You don't have to be born a leader. You can develop into a leader. And so the reason I start to answer your question that way is I found myself in leadership positions and I was always coming up against situations to where I felt like, were the challenges people facing, like, was it beyond just a leadership skill that they needed support with? Was there some other thing underlying that might be happening? And the reality, it is the case. I feel like a lot of people's issues with advancing and issues with productivity in the workplace are some way, shape, or form connected to mental health issues. And I'm not saying that they're mental health disorders always, but all of us have situations in our mind and ways that we were raised that really get in the way of us being at our best. And for so many people, and I resonate with this because for so much of my life, I didn't have a language or an understanding for it. And so people are doing the best with the information that they have, or they're doing the best with what they think's the issue, and they think that maybe they just need to try harder over in this area or develop this skill, but then they run into the same kind of mental health issues because they're not really addressing the root issue. And so when you're in a position of leadership and you have that framework and that filter on things, you start to see a lot of people's challenges. And as you're trying to develop people, you just see a lot of barriers that are probably some way, shape, or form connected to mental health that start to pop up. And that was my case. I've been in some pretty high leadership positions, and people have really learned the skill of hiding the challenges and masking what their issues are. And I just felt like a lot of my work is trying to normalize the conversation around mental health and leadership spaces because all of us have it. Some of us are just better at hiding it.
Speaking about hiding, and it's really, really, I feel like there's huge stigma when it comes to mental health, especially to people that lead us. Because in some sense that I believe the reason why they actually hide these mental health problems is the fact that if they start to actually be vocal about them, they will actually be strapped from be strapped from their leadership roles, because it would mean that they can't even actually handle a certain number of people. And it's something that I've seen in the corporate world, and as myself used to work in the corporate world, and definitely saw that, oh flip, people are in leadership roles and they taking care of other people and neglecting themselves. It's something that I realized, oh flip, how do we actually move around that? How do we actually start that conversation? Because it's all about starting the conversation, and oth- others will follow. But especially in corporate, it's hard to start a conversation. How would you advise one, as someone that with your experience, especially in leadership, how do we start a conversation around mental health and starting to actually see ourselves as human beings, not people that, in a way of not meant for us, always keep on pushing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's different entry points into this, but I would say the most effective that I've seen is whenever you have leaders who recognize that mental health isn't an HR box that needs to be checked, and it's more of it's a fundamental part of the human experience. It's like physical health, mental health, spiritual health for many people. It's part of our wiring. It's not just, hey, let's throw this program or let's throw this service at it and then wash our hands and we're good. And I also think another part is that senior leadership needs to be involved with it, and they need to recognize that mental health conversations in the workplace, it doesn't start at mid-level down. It needs to start from CEO down. It needs to, because everyone underneath you in the organization is getting their cues from you. And so if they see that you're stoic and you're rigid and you're not warm and you're hiding and you're masking, they think, oh, here's somebody that's 4 levels above me in the organization. That must be what I need to do if I want to be standing where they're standing. So now I'm going to suppress what's going on with me and what my emotional needs are, what my mental kind of health issues are, because I'm looking at my boss or 4 levels up and they're not showing that. So there's no room for me to show that, or I don't have a chance of being promoted here. And so it's got to start at the top if it's going to be widespread through the organization, and it needs to be genuine. And everyone in the organization ideally would recognize that, hey, these are just conversations that need to be normalized. For so many leaders, they're scared to bring it up because they're scared they're going to be hit with a situation or a question to where they feel like they're swimming in the deep end or they don't know how to address it. Everyone goes to the worst case scenario. We're going to talk about mental health, and all of a sudden someone's going to be threatening to kill themselves. And now all of a sudden I'm going to be like, I don't know. I wasn't, most people aren't trained to handle that. That's for the mental health professionals. And so let's just avoid that conversation. But the reality is there is a wide spectrum of situations that aren't just crisis related when it comes to mental health that are normal. You and I both have had a lot of really weird thoughts since we woke up today. There's normal things that pop in our head that it's like, where did that come from? Like, where did this stress come from? Where did this anxiety come from? That's part of the human experience. So normalizing, like, hey, you know what? Like, yes, I was given this project, but here's a concern I have about it. Or here's where I'm feeling insecure about that. Doesn't mean I can't do it. Doesn't mean I don't have the skill set to do it. But if I'm just being very honest and very open with kind of where I'm at, here's where I'm kind of a little anxious about that. And so, but normalizing that conversation, but I agree with you. A lot of people are scared to say anything about it because they feel like now leadership's going to feel like I'm a mental case, or I don't have the ability to do my job, or that I'm incapable of doing anything else. Versus, no, I'm just human. So does that answer your question?
It does, and it's something that I've seen a lot, and it especially I want to speak in terms of the higher management, the senior management. I feel like the reason why it's quite hard to start with the senior management is the fact that they don't believe in it. And there are a lot of people that don't believe in mental health because they still have that perception of saying that working till you get tired, you must be productive in the workplace, not realizing that, oh flip, I'm I'm human also. I shouldn't always be doing this and be able to have a break in between. So whilst I was actually wanting to learn about mental health in corporate, I come across a YouTube video by Dr. Who's this guy? I forgot his name, but he's from the States, and he spoke about a lot about burnout and what it really meant. And what he went through the video is the fact that he explained burnout as something that has happened within an organization, that you have a lot of pressure that, like, for example, working till you get tired and not taking care of your mental health. And people within the workplace expect you to actually, in a way of heal outside the work, and not realize that it, it it's impossible to do that, because it's something that needs to be addressed in the workplace. And it's something that I agree with you when you pointed out the fact that it should start in senior management. And on top of that, I want to go back to something that you said, when as is not is not it is not the job of HR to deal with things like mental health. But one of the things, I had a guest back, I think it was 3-4 years ago, where we spoke about mental health more. And we spoke about, in a instance of, when there's a free service, in the workplace, we tend not to go to that free service. And I feel like it goes back to that thing of, if I go there, to that psychologist in the workplace, they will see me as unfit to do my job. So I rather suffer now and deal with my things when outside the work. So what is your view in that aspect of people not actually taking the services that are offered by their own organizations?
Yeah, I think some services that organizations have, if I'm being honest, probably aren't worth having. There are, I see it all the time in organizations, again, that kind of treat, well, here's we the only time we're talking about mental health is once a year when it's Mental Health Awareness Month. And it's like they hang their hat on, hey, we're proactively dealing with the mental well-being of our people. Look, we celebrate mental health awareness every, one month out of the year. And my pushback on that would be like, do you think all of your employees' mental health issues are happening in that 1 month of the year? And it's beyond that. I think it's a more so I think the services are great. I think that they can be great. They, like employee assistant, programs that have counseling, and you can get, I work with organizations and help them with situations like that. Those can be helpful. I think an organization is going to get way more benefit out of just, how do we infuse this normal conversations around mental health and challenges in, when we're doing one-on-ones, when we're doing quarterly reviews, when we're doing our once a month meeting. How do we do a check-in and just talk about stress? Hey, this month I know that we're really launching this product or launching this new initiative. And I know that's putting a lot of stress and pressure on you all. So I just want to acknowledge that and recognize that I'm feeling it too as a leader. You know, we have certain numbers we have to hit. I'm feeling that. You're feeling that. That's normal for all of us to be feeling that. But, you know, knowing that we're in the trenches together can be enough movement, and that can be helpful just alone, so people aren't feeling like, am I the only one over here struggling and stressed out about this? So I would just say organizations are going to do better if they just infuse and normalize conversations around mental health in their normal stuff they're doing, their meetings, their one-on-one, their trainings, their check-ins. That seems to be way more productive and lasting than just this little thing we do over here for 2 weeks of the year, 3 weeks of the year. And those things just don't stick because it's not top of mind. If you tell me that mental health matters in your organization and you say that, you know, 2 weeks of the year we highlight mental health, that doesn't feel like it's truly prioritized. It feels like there's a whole lot of other things you're talking about, a whole lot more than that. And so I would just, to me, that feels a little bit shallow. And so I think finding ways, if for leaders listening, what are things you're already doing, and how do you incorporate mental health conversations into it? And it can be a very little goes a long way, and just be consistent with that. Even if it's the same question you ask every quarter when you do your training, or every month when you do your check-in or your one-on-one, like ask a question about stress levels. You know, ask, hey, how do you feel like you're balancing work and life? You know, it could be the same question, but just be consistent with it.
Definitely, I agree with you when it comes to consistency. It plays a huge role, because as much as an individual at first might be hesitant to, when you ask them a certain question, they'll be hesitant. They could lie, or they could not want to talk about it. And the more you ask about it, the more they see, oh, flip, this person, it really cares about my mental well-being. So it's really a gap. And another thing that I really loved how you actually, a point that you raised, is acknowledging the stress and the pressure as a leader. Because as you said earlier, to some point, I'm paraphrasing here, to some point, some people actually see role models who they are leaders or supervisors or managers. If I see my manager is actually putting that mask and it seems that like they are not stressed, they are not feeling the pressure. I will actually do the same thing, only to realize that, oh, flip, we are both suffering, but we are afraid to speak out. It's something that we need to take a look at, try to actually bring word to it. That's why I believe that this type of conversation are important, because you never know who's listening. It might be someone that is struggling with work. It might be a leader, a supervisor, or a manager, and really try to actually ask themselves questions that at some point, that when starting to have this conversation, definitely they would have questions like, am I a good leader? One of the things that I myself would actually ask myself that question: am I a good leader? Am I a role model to the people that I'm leading? It's something that I feel like we need to reflect on. And there's a huge rise when it comes to AIs, especially when it comes to workplace. And now, just because there's this meditation app and it has subscription, and an HR could give you that benefit and subscribe you to that, just to feel calm. That's all. And goes back to what you've said about that thing of celebrating mental health for 1 month, and you actually eventually, to me, that means you don't care about your employees. You don't care about people that actually help the organization to preach the message, to actually maximize on the visions and goals of the organization. So through my research, I'm from South Africa. So here in South Africa, I realized I came across a platform where as mix of corporate companies, and on top of that, there were software companies, whereas they provide, in a way, AI towards the productivity of employees. And one thing I saw is the fact that l- managers and supervisors are more into productivity more than employees' mental health. And that takes me to a conversation around in terms of fostering mental resilience more than caring about mental health. So what's your view on it? Do you think that we should actually, we are on a right, do you think most organizations are on the right path of choosing mental resilience more than mental health towards their employees, of taking care of them?
Yeah, if I'm understanding your question, like every organization's worried about the bottom line.
Yeah.
The productivity. They're trying to, they would probably say it in more eloquent words, but they're trying to figure out how do I get more, out of every person to make the business more profitable, right? It's like
Mm.
if everybody improved by 10%, like that's going to show up on the bottom line. I would just say that both can be true. I think by incorporating mental health strategies, you're going to automatically boost retention.
Mm.
You're going to boost engagement. And anytime you're boosting retention and engagement, you're going to boost results. And so I think some people want to, I don't know. There's a lot of things they try to shortcut to get more results, but those aren't going to be typically lasting if people don't feel cared for and don't feel valued and don't feel like they can be fully present in the workplace. And so I've seen, and I'm similar to you, I'm sure, but I've seen organizations that are across the spectrum with, they can be getting really good results.
Mm.
But my question is, if you're not if you're not concerned with how you're getting those results, I don't know how lasting it's going to be or how sustainable it's going to be. You're going to burn through people. People are going to leave. Your turnover is going to be crazy high. Think about how much organizations have to spend on training and recruiting and retraining and attracting talent. If they would spend as much time on the retention side of it. And I think a mental health one isn't the only thing organizations need to work on,
Yeah.
but it's a major one to
Mm.
where people feel like, I mean, most people spend more time at work than they do at home.
Mm.
And how do we make that an experience where we allow them to be more authentic and more open and transparent with what their challenges are and their struggles are? And they're not shamed for saying that, hey, I need help, or hey, I'm struggling. And that's something that's celebrated. And then there are definitely some services to support that, but it's a very normalized conversation. And you're gonna find that people want to work for you and want to follow you and want to stay in your organization
Mm.
if they're being cared for in that way. And that's always going to improve the bottom line.
Mm. And speaking of retaining employees and actually avoiding people leaving your organization, it's something that came across my mind now. It's, we believe that when we have this, for example, you spoke about sustainability of how will the organization be sustainable through its employees, and through that thing of keep on giving them promotions. And as much as you're giving promotions, at the same time you're giving me them more work. It's understandable. I'm giving more work, more money. I'm giving more money. That means more work. But at the same time, at what point you don't care about your employees, and being able to be a organization is driven by man is something that could look bad to you as someone that is a leader. And definitely that thing of hierarchy starts from the senior management, and being able to just actually take a look at different perspective. And I feel like that's where culture plays a role, because if I've created a culture of toxicity, of actually being in an environment that doesn't care about mental health, I won't care about mental health. I won't care how is my company successful, and definitely we both know that it won't be sustainable, and people will keep on will keep on living, and others coming, and eventually that waste a lot of money for an organization. What have you, through your years of actually in the working with close with companies, what common thing have you seen that keeps on reoccurring when it came to mental health?
Can you say the question again?
Through your experience of working with organizations, what is one thing that kept on occurring when it comes to mental health?
Yeah, I think that it is very common that the people at the top of the organization are the loneliest people in the organization.
Mhm.
And it's very common that, I mean, they're the most, um, the loneliest seat in the organization is the top. And so I think that the reality is, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One, it's like, okay, you're the final decision maker typically. So he or she, there's a lot of pressure on that. And so that's a lonely spot to be in, knowing that a decision I make is going to either make or break the organization. You're also looked a lot of times at being the strongest. And so things should bother you the least. And so therefore I need to even more so put my mask on or pretend I'm not as stressed or as scared as I am. I need to get over things quicker. I don't have time to be, let's say that the organization had let's say that they had a bad year of profitability.
Mm.
They don't always have time to process that, because they have to go into, okay, what do I need to change? How do I need to motivate, inspire? How do I need to do this, that? They don't get a lot of self-reflection time because they're always on for so many other people. And so I think there's a lot of, I mean, that's a consistent of when I talk to senior level leaders, CEOs, presidents, and I just say like, and I acknowledge that, hey, you're in a pretty lonely spot. It's very, I would say almost 100% of the time they look and they said, absolutely. They do not disagree with me. And sometimes it's the first time they've actually heard that. They felt that, but they've never heard that. And so I think that's one consistent thing that I see a lot of times is the people at the top of the organization, they have just as many concerns and fears and mental health struggles that keep them up at night, that keep their mind racing, as the very new person in the organization that just got onboarded. But they don't have the ability or the community to be able to verbalize that. They can't go and tell their board that. If they tell their board that, then they're worrying they're gonna send everybody into panic. You know, and that people aren't gonna think that they're fit to say what you said earlier. And so that's where I think and that one of the things I do is I help executives and I coach executives, and having a third party to be able to talk to openly and candidly is pretty necessary for top level leaders, because it is such a lonely spot. And so that's a very consistent thing I see.
And to someone that in a perspective of in a lower level, definitely an employee or a manager or a supervisor, how does one actually encourage a senior manager to actually take care of their mental well-being? Definitely, as I've said earlier, we are humans, and definitely we expect the senior manager to actually look at motivate us. How do we then actually reverse that thing of
Yep.
me? Yeah, how do we do that?
That's a great question. And that really is a very thoughtful approach. Of There's many people who are lower in the organization looking up and saying, well, they get paid more, they should have this figured out. It's not my job to lead them or my job to care for them. They should be doing that for me. But I do think if you're wanting an organization across the board to be at its healthiest, I do. I mean, so I think it's taking genuine concern of your leaders and say, like, you're in those one-on-ones and they're asking you a question, and hopefully your boss is asking you how you're doing, what are your stress levels? How's your family? I think even normalizing the conversation to be like, hey boss, like, how are your stress levels? How are you managing this? How are you managing last quarter when we were down or we were working a bunch? Like, how did you manage all that? I know you did a lot for us to help set us up for success and process that with us, but what kind of toll did that take on you? I saw you staying late last Wednesday, and I know that you were putting in some extra time. So how's that impacting your family or your wife or your husband? Like, I think taking a genuine interest in your bosses again can help chip away at some of that isolation and loneliness that the top level feels if they feel like the people who they're leading are noticing and taking a vested interest in them.
Definitely, they will find that very thoughtful and realize that, oh, flip, it's not just me. I actually, it's not that everyone don't care about me. They actually care about me. And sometimes showing it, it ends up appreciating it. It's something that quite interesting in terms of looking at that perspective and having that empathy towards your boss. And definitely most people have that sense of flip. And as you've said that they paid more, so I shouldn't care about them. And yeah, it's something that goes with, I believe, empathy plays a huge role. Before we wrap up, I just want to talk about the podcast, and definitely as someone that is helping organization to actually have that conversation around mental health. Would you say that starting your podcast, you wanted to have a voice within the conversation, a voice that will amplify it towards any walks of life? And on top of that, one thing that I realized when I went through PodMatch is the fact that there's so many few people that speak about workplace mental health in the workplace. And as you kept on saying that it's a conversation that needs to be normalized. It's a conversation that we need to actually be able to preach for ourselves. And it goes back to that thing of self-advocacy and being able to actually amplify the conversation through your small circles, through people that you know, and eventually you never know where it will take off. It's such a conversation that I myself really invested into actually having, but for some unfortunate reason is the fact that it's quite few people that are actually open on talking about the conversation. And also through the rise of AIs and the digital age is the fact, and that comes with its own problems and definitely with its positives and negatives. And but at the same time, one thing that I realized, we actually focus more on the negative, and at the same time, as much as we focus on the negative, but we don't want to address them. It, as we said, that is something that you will be seen as incompetent, that you can't do your job. So we need to find someone else to do the job because you're always complaining, not realizing that when we speak about mental health, it's something that should be normal. It's something that you should feel. It's not something that you should be ashamed of feeling. It is a conversation I want to actually have. So it was a great pleasure to be talking to you, Derek, and really, really appreciate the perspective of leadership. It's something that we don't look at a lot, and we only focus on not on leadership, but on the other side of employees, people that just arrive at work and people that have been there and not have been in the leadership role. So thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your time.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.